Hey guys, how are you all doing? This is the MMA breakdown with my predictions for UFC Fight Night 41, Munoz versus Musashi, taking place in Berlin, Germany next weekend on Fight Pass. And I gotta say, looking at these fights, both the prelim card and the main card, I think this event is a bunch of crap. A lot of guys you've never heard of, especially if you're not a hardcore fan. Not a lot to be interested in here. It doesn't look like it's going to be a fun time watching it, but I'm still going to watch it and going to give you my predictions here. So first up on the UFC Fight Pass prelim card, at heavyweight, Victor Pesta is taking on Ruslan Magomedov. Two newcomers here. I think this is the second Magomedov we have in the UFC now, but I don't know anything about either of these guys, but just looking at their records, Magomedov is on a 6-fight win streak. Coming off of 3 decisions, his last 3 fights, and his last fight was a decision over Tim Sylvia. He's 6'4", 255 it says, and Victor Pesta is also 6'4", but quite a bit lighter, 242, and he's on a, let's see here, 9-fight win streak. Undefeated. No guys on his record that I'm familiar with. Seems like a bunch of nobodies. Does have several finishes though, several TKO finishes, and this guy is a Czech fighter. Seems like he has more finishes on his record than Magomedov, but Magomedov at least has fought some guys that we've heard of. Tim Sylvia, Rico Rodriguez. Yeah, I'm going to have to go with Magomedov, and he's also Dagestani, Russian. Those guys usually perform. All of the Russians coming in the UFC now, this big influx of Russian or Dagestani fighters. So I'm going to go with Magomedov by decision, I guess, but I don't know anything about these guys. I really have no idea, no analysis to offer there. Next up at featherweight, Andy the Little X Ogle taking on Maximo Blanco. I'm taking Ogle here. This is the same case as this is the story of Ogle's career. He's fighting a guy that should be far more skilled than him, but Ogle's got a big heart. Ogle, really small guy by his physique and his look. You wouldn't think he's a fighter, but he's managed to even though he hasn't won many fights, he's managed to have some success just on pure heart, pure grit. His only win in the UFC since Tough 15 is over Josh Grisby. He was stuck in a triangle for most of that first round, and I think that's how his fight to get into the Tough House went as well. He was stuck in a triangle for the whole fight, but was pounding the guy under him and won the decision that way. I thought he won the fight against Akira Corsani. He knocked down Corsani a few times on the feet, but lost that decision. And then against Cole Miller and Oliveira in his last 2 fights, guys, like I said, far more experienced than him, far more skilled than him. They're dominating him, or Cole Miller was dominating him early, but Ogle turned it on in that 3rd round, was able to get on top of Cole Miller and really win that third round big. Same thing with Charles Oliveira. He was able to take this guy down and was doing fairly well early on in that fight. Eventually got submitted though. And if he can put up that kind of effort against those two guys, I think he's got what it takes to beat Blanco. Blanco, he's been pretty disappointing in the UFC. 1-3. His only win over Sam Sicilia, who I consider to be a really low-level fighter in the UFC. His losses to Marcus Brimage, Akira Corsani, and Felipe Arantes in his last fight. His striking doesn't seem to be all that good. I think the strongest part of his game is his wrestling. I believe he was on a Venezuelan wrestling team, or maybe it was Japan. I'm not sure, but I think Ogle's got enough heart and grit. I think he's aggressive. He goes for it on the feet enough, and again, skill-wise, he's going to be really outmatched here, but you can't count out Ogle's heart. He's got a real big heart, and I think he's going to find a way to get a decision here. Next up at welterweight, Peter Sabata taking on Pawel Palek. I don't know how to pronounce that correctly. Sabata, I remember him only from his last UFC fight, which was way back at UFC 122 against Amir Sadala. Lost unanimous decision. That was pretty much a kickboxing match as I remember it. Fairly back and forth, fairly even as I remember, but lost his 3 fights in the UFC to Sadala, Wilkes, and Paul Taylor. Not really even mid-level guys. Sadala was at that time maybe, but he's been on a 5-fight win streak since then. Guys that you've never heard of in the European circuit. I guess I'll take Sabata. I believe he's the favorite. And then Pollock doesn't even have a page here on Wikipedia, and I'm not going to bother to go to Sherdog or anything. I'm not going to pretend to be able to give any analysis here, but I guess I'll pick Sabata since he's been in the UFC before. Won a decision. He's a kickboxer. And that's about all I can say there. Guess I'll go with Sabata. Next up at bantamweight, Yuri Alcantara taking on Von Lee. Finally a fight with guys I know. Yuri Alcantara, I think, is really underrated. He's been really good in the UFC. And he has a knockout of Ricardo Lamas from the WEC, but since coming to the UFC, he is 4-2. Should be 5-2 with that no contest over Pedro Nobre, where he was very dominant and basically TKO'd Nobre. But they overturned that. Originally it was a loss because he hit him in the back of the head, but looks like they overturned it to a no contest. But he originally came to the UFC as a featherweight, had dominant wins over Arantes and Omagawa, where he really out-grappled those guys, looked really good. Lost to Hakran Diaz, where he was out-grappled, surprisingly out-wrestled. Went down to bantamweight, had that very dominant performance over Nobre. He's lightning fast in the first round. He's a killer. He really goes after it on the feet from the get-go, and very dangerous once it hits the ground. He throws those hooks in and takes guys' backs. Did that to Nobre. Against Iliardi Santos, KO'd him in the first round. Looked really good doing it. Again, just lightning fast in that first round. He was all over Santos. And against Faber, got Faber in a bad spot early on. Took his back before getting reversed and then losing a decision there. Kind of got dominated there. And then his last fight against Wilson Hayes, that was a really fun back and forth grappling match. He won that fight. I thought it was super close, razor thin, but this guy is, I think he's really talented on the feet. He's a killer, really chases after guys early as soon as the fight starts, like he did to Nobre and Santos. Those fights looked really similar, and on the ground, very crafty grappling, very slick jiu-jitsu. Heiss is a very good grappler, and that's why his last fight was super close, but he's usually very dominant on the ground. And I think he's going to be able to submit Von Lee. Von Lee's a tough guy, but doesn't seem to be able to hang with the better guys in the division. He has losses to Rafael Assunção, where he did get submitted. Also got submitted by T.J. Dillashaw. And he lost a decision in his debut to Carriazo. Got out grappled there as well. He has an armbar win over Kid Yamamoto, and won decisions against Matanobu Tezuka, and his last fight against Namfan, where he really outboxed Namfan. He has decent boxing, but as his record shows, in that Assunção and the Carriazo and Dillashaw fight, he is susceptible to getting submitted, and against a really slick guy on the ground like Alcantara, I think Alcantara is going to hurt him on the feet early on, get it to the ground, and submit this guy. So taking Alcantara by first round submission. Next up at middleweight, Magnus Siedenblad taking on Krzysztof Jotko. Siedenblad, he lost his debut, I believe it was to Francis Carmont, I believe, or that might have been... No, I think he lost his debut, I think, to Simeon Thorson. Then I believe he got finished in that fight. I think he got rear naked choked, if I remember correctly. And then he also got RNC'd by Carmont. I think that was his next fight. And then he had a submission win, a guillotine choke over Jared Hammond in his last fight in the first round. I believe those were his only fights in the UFC. He doesn't have a page here. And then Krzysztof Jotko, this guy fought on the Australia card last December, the Hunt Bigfoot card, I believe, and I think he fought Bruno Santos. And from what I remember from that fight, just off the top of my head, Santos had him pressed up against the cage for most of the fight. And then I think at one point Jotko was able to separate and was able to tee off on Santos. And I remember thinking he lost the fight, but I was happy he won because he seemed to be going for it more and seemed to have an interesting striking style, as I recall. But Magnus Siedenblad, a really big guy for the division. I think he's going to be physically bigger than Jotko, from what I remember. I kind of like Jotko. He just... I kind of remember thinking that I should pay attention to this guy from his last fight. I think Jotko will be better on the feet. Siedenblad should have the advantage on the ground. I'm going to go with Jotko, though. Two guys still pretty green in the UFC. Yeah, I want to go with Jotko. I feel like that might be an unpopular pick, but I remember liking his striking style, and Siedenblad I don't think has shown too much. I don't think a win over Jared Hammond really proves too much in the UFC, but Yeah, I guess go either way. I'm going to take Joko. Next up, a lightweight, Nick Hine taking on Drew Dober. I'm going to take on, I'm going to look up Nick Hine's page here on SureDog. Forgive me for being unprepared. I am going to take him, though, because Drew Dober, I remember his last fight against, what's the guy's name? Sean Spencer. And he got dominated in a very underwhelming fashion. He got dominated but was never hurt. Just kind of outsparred. It looked like a really bad sparring match. Sean Spencer just was able to tag him with a simple jab cross the whole fight, and Dober just looked like he didn't know how to throw a strike. All right, Nick Hine. So I'm planning to pick Hine here, but I just want to take a look at his record, see what's going on with him. German fighter, 30 years old, 5'8". He's on a 4-fight win streak. Again, just guys on the European circuit. 3 out of his last 4 wins have been by decision. No guys on his record that he's 10-1. Dober's 14-5, and let me take a look at Dober's record here. Before that loss to Sean Spencer in his last fight, he's on a 5-fight win streak. Also, guys you never really heard of. Has 3 rear naked choke wins there. Lost to Will Brooks. Seems like he's more experienced, has more fights, but I was very unimpressed with him in his last fight against Sean Spencer. And Sean Spencer, I gained a lot more respect for him after his last fight over his last fight with Alex Garcia, even though he lost it. But I thought Dober looked terrible in that fight. I feel like picking Nick Hine just because Dober looked really outclassed by Sean Spencer in their last fight. Got very badly outpointed, but Sean Spencer's performance there didn't seem to justify how inactive and how badly Dober fought in that fight. So I'm gonna go with Nick Hine here. I don't know how, but I'll take Nick Hine. On to the main card at featherweight, Tom Ninamaki taking on Nicholas Backstrom. Ninamaki had a very impressive win in his last fight over Hani Yahya, really out grappling him, out positioning him on the ground. And Yahya just looked lost for a guy whose specialty is grappling. Ninamaki really shut down his ground game, although didn't seem to really get close to any submissions in that fight. So I'm going to take Ninamaki and Backstrom again. Let me look up this guy's page here. Again, this card is just filled with newcomers and guys I've never heard of. I think it's a pretty poor card. Let's see here, Nicholas Backstrom. He's a Swedish fighter. 7-0. Mostly finishes. Again, just guys on the European circuit. 5-fight win streak. 7-0. More finishes than decisions. A couple of TKO wins in a row in his last few fights. But I gotta go with Ninamaki, really dominating a veteran like Yaya. I think he does the same thing here. Um, Although Yaya is very willing to fight on the ground, and maybe Backstrom's going to be too good on the feet. I don't know how Ninamaki's wrestling is, but I assume he'll be able to get it to the ground and dominate Backstrom positionally from there. So I'm gonna go with Ninamaki by decision. This card is awful. Middleweight, Luke, Big Slow, Barnett taking on Sean Strickland. Barnett, I wasn't as high as this guy coming off of the Ultimate Fighter. I thought he had a razor thin decision win over Colin Hart in his first fight in the UFC. Colin Hart was also from Tough 17, and I thought that was a really close fight that could have gone to Colin Hart, but Big Slow got the unanimous decision. Then in his two fights since then, I thought he was very impressive and greatly improved. Taking on Andrew Craig, I thought that was a big step up for his first fight. After Tough, Colin Hart was also a guy on Tough, and for the first non-Tough related fight, I thought Andrew Craig was a really stiff opponent. He was boxing up Luke Barnett early there, and Barnett just was finally able to land his strikes. He cracked Craig, put him down, and submitted him quickly, the rear naked choke on the ground. And then against Mats Nilsson in his last fight, same thing. Nilsson, a lot smaller guy, was able to look like he was able to close the distance and looked like he might be able to crack Barnett. He landed a few good shots. Looked like he hurt him early on, but Barnett chipped away at him with that jab. Looked greatly improved, and then he landed a head kick that put him down. I thought he looked really impressive. His striking seems to be coming along very well. I think he's a good prospect. But Sean Strickland, in his last fight, the way he dominated Bubba McDaniel, I also thought was very impressive. He was all over McDaniel from the start. Was going after it on the feet and took him down. I believe he took him down. I don't think he dropped him. But once they're on the ground, very aggressive and got that rear naked choke quickly and put him away. I think this is a really interesting fight, actually a good matchup between two prospects. Barnett has the Ultimate Fighter experience and also a little bit more UFC experience, but I think Strickland, with that really aggressive style, I feel like we haven't seen Barnett tested against a really good wrestler. Colin Hart was a wrestler, and he was able to get some takedowns on Barnett. I feel like Strickland might be able to expose him a little bit there, but I don't know. On the feet, I think Barnett's definitely going to be more technical. He might have bigger power, but I don't think Barnett's going to run away with this like a lot of people are thinking, and I kind of feel inclined to take Strickland here. I just think I don't know. He seems like he might have a more well-rounded game than Barnett, but I really don't know. I think I am going to take Strickland here. I know it's not a really logical pick, but I think he might, from the onset, he might push a little harder pace than Barnett, and I think he's going to be a more aggressive guy in Barnett's face a little bit more than the other guys that Barnett has fought, and Andrew Craig and Nilsson. I think Strickland will be able to really push that pace and get it to the ground, and we're going to see how Barnett does off of his back, where we haven't seen him before. But yeah, I'm going to take Strickland, I think, maybe by decision, possibly by submission, but I'm going to take Strickland. Next up in middleweight, finally we get to the only really meaningful and interesting fights on this card. Francis Carmont taking on CB, the Doberman Dalloway. Doberman has been on a really good streak. After losing to Mark Munoz and Jared Hammond, he turned things around lately. Had a win over Jason Miller. That was 2 years ago. And still there, didn't look like, he had really made great strides in his game. But against Daniel Sarafian, he was getting outstruck early in that fight, but was able to drop Sarafian later and take over with the wrestling. Seemed to just kind of be able to endure more than Sarafian. And then against Tim Boetsch, his striking just looked like it had just improved greatly. And I thought he won that fight. I thought he got robbed. Was really landing really good combinations on Boetsch. Really good hand speed. His hands look really light and just looked very efficient with his striking. Somehow lost the decision though in his last fight, knocking out Cesar Mutanche Ferreira. And Ferreira's a really talented striker as well. For those of you, a lot of people I think didn't watch Tough Brazil 1, which he was on and won. Ferreira's a capoeira striker, capoeira fighter, but or capoeira style striking, but he's got some talent both with his submissions and especially his striking. I was really impressed that he tried to walk down Dalloway, back him up against the fence, and Dalloway just threw a big hook and caught him right on the chin. I was really impressed with that win by Dalloway. And Carmont, on the other hand, I thought he really proved in his last fight against Souza. He didn't go easily. Souza, Jacare took his back early in that fight, was working for the choke for a long time, and Carmont was able to fight it off. That there wasn't much. That fight wasn't contested much on the feet. Jacare was able to take him down a lot, but Carmont didn't go easily. I think he proved that he can hang with the top guys in the division, and he's not going to go easily. I also thought his win over Philippou was really impressive, although it was incredibly boring. It was basically lay and pray. And then before that, his first few fights in the UFC, he those decision wins over Larkin and Lawler, I thought he lost both of those. He looked very inactive, wasn't willing to engage. I thought both those guys outworked him. But his fights before that, he was much more dominant and much more willing to engage. Had a really dominant win over Kamosi in his debut. Choked out Magnus Siedenblad. Also choked out Carlos Vemola. Seemed to have real finishing ability and very dominant on the ground. But then had those crazy, those bizarre wins over Lawler and Larkin that I thought he kind of clearly lost. And then turned it around against, a guy further up the rankings in Phillip, who really dominated him in a way he hadn't done to either Lawler or Larkin, and then, was able to hang in there with Jacare. So his UFC career, his performances have been very mixed and kind of inconsistent, but from his last few fights, I think he is improving and is proving that he can hang in there with more elite guys. This is a really interesting matchup. I was going back and forth on this one for a while. My initial thought was Carmont is going to be able to. He's going to be able to control the striking range. He's really strong in the clinch. He showed that against Kamosi. And I think he was going to be able to control the striking and take Dalloway down and just smother him from top position. But if you really think about it, Dalloway has shown the better striking game of late. I think he's going to have greater hand speed than Carmon. He's going to be able to land those combinations with more fluidity, more ease. And Dalloway's a great scrambler. He's really good on the ground. We really saw that in his win over Joe Dirksen. And he was able to take down Mark Munoz early in their fight. Yeah, he's a really good scrambler. He's got a great guillotine choke and can really adjust that. He's a real solid wrestler and ground guy. So I feel like in the scrambles he might be able to, keep Carmont from just laying on him on top. I think if Carmont tries to take him down, Dalloway might be able to latch onto a guillotine choke. So it's a real interesting matchup. I could see either guy taking it. It's a real interesting matchup, and I think that Carmont will ultimately be able to control him on the ground. I think on the feet, while we haven't seen much of Carmont striking, I think he's going to be a little more athletic. I think he's going to be able to control Dalloway in the clinch, although Dalloway is also a big guy himself. It's an interesting matchup. I'm not sure, who to pick here, but I think I might side with Carmont, but I could really see Dalloway, catching him with his much improved striking. I could see him being the better scrambler on the ground, but I'll side with Carmont. I think he's faced better guys, and I think he's going to be a little physically bigger, and I think ultimately we're going to see him, get top position and win the fight there. On the main event, Mark Munoz taking on Gegard Mousasi. Mark Munoz, I think he's kind of coming to the end of his career here. Not as active as he once was. Got knocked out in his last fight against Machida. Before that, had a win over Boch. Only fought 2 times in the last year. And before that, got knocked out by Weidman. And Munoz has only had 2 fights in the UFC so far, against Ilir Latifi, where his boxing looked good. He was able to walk down Latifi the whole fight and out jab him. He seems like he has really good fundamental boxing. And then against Machida, just really wasn't willing to commit to anything, and Machida just kind of outstruck him, outpointed him. Now, I haven't followed Mousasi's career very well before the UFC. I was familiar with the name. I knew he was a really highly regarded fighter. I did see the win over Mike Kyle. I also watched the Keith Jardine fight, and way back, I did see his loss to King Molal. Now, originally, I picked Munoz to win this fight. I thought, just right now where both guys are in their career, I think Munoz is kind of coming to an end. With all the injuries and the layoffs he's had, I don't think he's as athletic as he once was. And Munoz is quite a bit, several years younger than Munoz. But, yeah, I thought it was striking. I thought it was going to be a lot more technical, more dangerous than Munoz. But I remembered the problems that Mousasi's had with wrestlers, mainly King Mo and Jardine. The King Mo fight, I remember, it was a long time ago. I never watched that fight again, but I remember Mousasi just being taken down at will and just smashed. King Mo just getting off all the ground and pound he wanted and just holding down Mousasi, really exposing him pretty badly. And then against Jardine, Mousasi was really dominating that fight on the feet, and Jardine was badly hurt, but still able to get a few takedowns on him, and that fight was actually turned out to be a draw, even though I remember watching that fight and thinking that Mousasi did win, but the point is that Jardine was still able to take this guy down. Jardine, a guy who's not even considered a good wrestler, and that was pretty late into Jardine's career. Yeah, and Munoz, on the other hand, wrestling is, that's his game, that's his bread and butter. After losing to Weidman, coming back and fighting Boach, he showed that his wrestling skills are still there, and Munoz is a smart guy, and I think he's really going to look to expose Mousasi there in the wrestling. Mousasi is a lot younger. I think at this point he might be more athletic, although Munoz is a very good athlete as well. He's a very successful collegiate wrestler, but Munoz, when his mind is right, he's really aggressive. He fights with a lot of hunger, a lot of heart. I think he was really going to go after Mousasi and go after him with the wrestling. Munoz's wrestling, although I do recognize, I always thought Munoz's wrestling was not very good in MMA, not very effective. Wasn't able to wrestle with guys like Yushin Okami. In that Tim Boach fight, I think Munoz's wrestling, and also in the Damian Maia fight, looked pretty good though, and I think that's what we might see here. I haven't really seen anything in Mousasi's games since those fights with Jardine and King Mo to suggest that he's really fixed his problem with takedown defense. I know he has a win over Oven St. Preux, who's a wrestler. I never watched that fight though, so I can't analyze that fight. I don't know how that went, but I think Mousasi's wrestling is going to get it done for him. And if he does get him down, we know how aggressive he is with his ground and pound once he gets on top. So I'm going to pick Munoz here. I think he'll win by decision, but I know that's probably an unpopular pick. But if you think that I'm regarding Munoz's wrestling too highly and I'm being too critical of Mousasi's takedown defense and ground game, definitely let me know, and let me know why I should take Mousasi. But I'm taking Munoz here. I'm taking Munoz. Alright, well, those are my predictions for UFC Fight Night 41, Munoz versus Mousasi. Thanks a lot for watching, guys. I really appreciate it. Please like the video, comment with your thoughts on any of my picks or any of these fights, and please subscribe. I will be doing my predictions for Tough Brazil 3 finale, Miocic versus Maldonado. Check out those predictions, and we'll be doing recap videos for this event as well as Tough Brazil 3 finale. And check out my recap for the last UFC event, UFC 173, Barao versus Dillashaw, if you're interested in that. Alright, thanks for watching, guys. Take care, and I will see you next time. Bye.